Lake Baikal is shared by two regions, the region of Irkutsk and the Republic of Buryatia, a Mongol autonomous republic in Russia. This has been since the Treaty of Nerchinsk in 1689, when China ceded the lands to the Russian Empire. It is the world's largest freshwater lake by volume, containing 20% of the world's fresh water, excluding groundwater and springs, of course. Crossing by ferry from a village called Listivyanka to the village of Baikal, we can find other visitors that you wouldn't expect. The Baikal seals, the world's only freshwater seals. They probably got stuck here during Nova's flood when the waters were receding. There are only a few sea animals that can adapt to different salinity levels in the water, such as the bull shark and herring. And if we put a freshwater seal in salt water, it would eventually die of dehydration, since the higher amounts of salt would draw out the water and dehydrate the seal. Likewise, if we took a saltwater seal and put it into fresh water, it too would die. Absorbing more water into their bodies, the membrane wall of their cells would explode. The rest of the world's seals adapted slowly over time, over about the last 5,000 years, to the increase in salinity levels in the oceans. Even today, this process is still taking place. And since there was only fresh water before the flood, it would only be a logical conclusion that they've been here ever since. Many people who live on the lake live very poorly. Because of the lack of job opportunities around the lake, many people have gone to the cities in search of work. There are some hot mineral springs in the lake due to the earthquakes that have happened in the past. There is also many rivers that flow into Lake Baikal, including the Angara River, which is a tributary of the Yenisei River. Because of the size of the lake and the mountains surrounding it, the climate is much more milder here. The temperature in the wintertime is -6 Fahrenheit or -21 Celsius. And during the summer months, the average temperature is 52 degrees Fahrenheit or 11 degrees Celsius. The lake generally freezing in January and thawing again in May or June. The train here was built in 1954 and has run on this line ever since, on the Irkutsk side of the lake. The train line operates from May to November depending on the weather conditions, and it allows you to see much of the southern part of the lake, making stops at various villages along the way. Lake Baikal contains 45 islets and islands, the largest of which is the island of Oykan, where the most holy site for the Animists and Buddhists living at Lake Baikal is located. The name of the place is called Shaman Rock. And in times past, the shamans would perform many religious ceremonies here, as well as act as judges for the people. In some cases, they would order that a criminal had to stay at the site all night in the freezing cold. If he survived till the morning, he would be let go and forgiven of his crime. After the Russian Revolution, during the 20s and early 30s, all the shamans were executed, the Soviets considering them an enemy of the state. Many tried to revive the animistic practices and wore white clothing to identify themselves as the new shamans. This is because the Soviets outlawed all shamanistic clothing, but they were unable to perform any of the miracles or divinations that the previous shamans had done before. There are several reasons why they could not perform these acts. The first and most important reason was because they were not possessed with the high-level spirit. Secondly, they were not a generational shaman, similar to the Red Witches in Europe, in which they gained more spirits and stronger spirits than the previous generation had, giving the person more power but giving the spirits more control over the person that they possess. And thirdly, they had no training in the practices of the occult. One such example of this is in the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 16, verse 16, when a woman possessed with the spirit of divination follows Paul and his company, and then after many days, the spirit bothering them, Paul commanded in the name of Jesus Christ for the spirit to come out of the woman, and then afterwards the woman could no longer divinate, which brought her masters much gain. And one such occultist named Nikolai Roerich stayed at a village on the southern part of the lake named Old Inca Solka, known for many of his paintings of the Siberian landscapes. He is well known in Russia. He was a writer, artist, archaeologist, and occultist. He even knew U.S. President Frederick D. Roosevelt and was close friends with his second Vice President, Henry Wallace. Rourke and his wife Yelena founded a philosophical society in New York City called Agni Yoga Society, which mixed Eastern philosophy with Freemasonry. Henry Wallace in 1934 was the Secretary of Agriculture, and he appointed Rourke to one of the positions in the department. Wallace then commissioned a mission to Asia in search of a drought-resistant grass that could be grown in the Dust Bowl region of America that was having trouble at the time. But this mission was all a guise to conceal his real mission. Rourke then took his son with him to head to Japan. While he was there, he met with Japanese officials and publicly acknowledged the puppet state that they had created in Manchuria, which the US would not publicly acknowledge at the time. Upon leaving Japan, he arrived in Manchuria to meet the newly installed emperor there, as well as his White Russian brethren. Rourke and his family were in support of the White Russians during the Russian Civil War and had left Russia as soon as the Soviets were coming to power in 1917. Rourke then negotiated a deal with the new emperor to set up a military base consisting of White Russians and Mongolians, to then take back Siberia from the Soviets. And soon after, the U.S. government gave him $200,000 to buy arms and ammunition to arm his newly formed army. Sometime later, Rourke came to this village, Old Inca Solka, and stayed here for about a month, negotiating with the native peoples and trying to form an Asiatic state, and then form an Asian Union. However, after failing to unite the peoples of northern China, Mongolia, Manchuria, Tibet, and Central Asia, he was then asked to go to India to then turn in his documents. Upon doing so, the U.S. then requested that he pay for the arms that were borrowed in the amount of $200,000, which today is the equivalent to $4 million. He never paid it, of course. Afterwards, he only returned to the United States once for a visit, remaining in India until he died in 1947. Today, they are still trying to form an Asiatic Union. Many things have happened here at Lake Baikal that are long forgotten, being one of the most mysterious places in all of Siberia.